This is the better version of the song than the one that is on the album in color. It like a dig like a do got be do. The song is I Want You to Want Me, and it is the way better version of it. Because this one isn't on In Color. This one is on the 1978 live album Cheap Trick at Budokan. It's also number 426 out of 500 on the Spotify Ridge, the 500, with me, the king, Caduga, Josh Adam Myers. What's up, you true doogs that have been tuning in since the jump? Lockdown, in your houses, quarantine, social distancing, still listening to the record each week. This is the best time to do my podcast challenge. If that's what, maybe that's why it could be so much bigger if I started calling it a challenge. Do the 500 album challenge. All these like dance videos on TikTok doing the 500 dance challenge. I love you guys. I hope you're doing well. I'm doing great, man. I'm really enjoying the quarantine. I'm having a good time. I'm not gonna lie. I'm staying really busy. I'm working out. I got the dog. If you do not have a good situation out there, I am praying for you and sending my love, and hopefully you get through this and everybody in your family's safe and secure. All right. You guys want to find out what the fuck is up with this record? This self-produced live album came out on Epic Records by Rockford, Illinois hard rock power pop band Cheap Trick. And it was recorded over 2 late April nights of 1978 in Tokyo, Japan's famous indoor sports arena. Originally intended to be an exclusive Japanese-only release, because after 3 albums and a grueling tour schedule opening for bands like Kiss, Queen, The Kinks, Cheap Trick still wasn't breaking through in America. They were actually about $1 million in debt. So fame and fortune seemed spoogle. But a phenomenon was happening in Japan. Their first 3 releases went gold with number 1s and top 10 singles. So late April of 78, with little to lose in America, the band went for their first tour of Japan to test the waters. When they landed, they were greeted by 5,000 screaming fans at the airport. Like they just got off the Southwest flight, came down, they grabbed their bags, and it's just, ah, ah. And guess what? Just like their heroes, the Beatles, Cheap Trick Mania didn't stop there. They couldn't walk down the street or even step out of their hotel rooms without screaming crazed fans chasing them to take pictures and rip off their clothes. In fact, hotels were kicking them out because of the thousands of fans flooding their lobbies and waiting outside for them to catch a glimpse. When they played those 2 nights at Budokan, they were almost drowned out by the screams of their frenzied female audience of 12,000 screaming female Asian chicks. Just, ah! You can hear it when you listen to this record. Recording the shows was the idea of the record company, who decided that every act that they had that went through Japan would put out a live at Budokan album, with Cheap Trick coming after Bob Dylan. They were already monsters on stage after years of solid touring, but that energy rarely made it onto their records until they released this in Japan on October 8th of 78. And this is the coolest shit I've ever read in my life. As Rick Nielsen recalled, we rode coach on the way there and first class on the way back. Booyah! That is the most Dougal shit I have ever heard. While obviously huge in Japan, hip record stores in America soon caught wind, and the import record sold 30,000 of its eventual 75,000 copies domestically. So the label released 6 songs from it in America on a promo record called From Tokyo to You, which blew up and guaranteed the full album a domestic release in February of 79. It became Cheap Trick's best-selling album, going triple platinum, and its lead single, I Want You to Want Me, the better version, went to number 7 on Billboard's Hot 100, their highest-ranking single to date. And I honestly have a guest today that is probably my highest-ranking this is fucking cool that I'm talking to this guy. Ladies and gentlemen, the drummer from the Cult, Velvet Revolver, and Guns N' Roses, the one and only Matt Sorum. He's a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee, an environmentalist as well, not just a fucking rock star, and an activist who helps kids get instruments in between the grades K through 12. The dude is awesome. I'm a huge fan. I fanboy out at the beginning, depending on what edit he does, because I fucking was like, I was really stoned when we did this. It's the apocalypse. The interview's great. We're having a great time. You know, I love it. I'm so happy I got to do this. It's quarantine, so he's at his place in Palm Springs. I'm at my place in the Hollywood Hills, baby. Keeping it Dougal 100 all the time. Rate, review, and most importantly, subscribe to the 500 on Spotify. Follow me at Josh Adam Myers on all social media. Email the podcast at 500podcast@gmail.com. And follow the Facebook group, the 500 Podcast with Jam, and the 500 Podcast fan page, where you got my buddy Evan controlling it. And he's a meth addict, so it'll be fantastic. Get some fucking shit over there, people. And for all things 500, go to the website, the500podcast.com. Well, nothing left to say, but here we go with number 4. Oh, 26 out of 500. A cheaper trigger at Budokan. All right, enjoy. Hello there, Matt Sorum. Hello there, Matt Sorum. Are you ready to talk? Are you ready to talk?
The crowd roars.
You have to understand how much I love you, dude. I'm such a big fan. I've met you a few times. First, I met you in the parking lot of the Guitar Center on fucking Sunset. And I was like, holy shit, Matt. And you were like, you gave me the rock fingers, and that was it, even though I probably looked like a stalker. And then the second time I met you was at this fucking shit. It was during NAMM. You were playing at some gymnasium with like Johnny Depp and a few other people, and I was backstage with my friend Tull Wilkenfeld.
Tal.
And you walked by, and after you were done, you were like, yo, what's up, Tull? And then you were like, what's up, dude? And you looked at me, and I was like, dude, that's the coolest motherfucker I have ever seen, dude.
Thanks.
So this is like, and I saw you with Velvet Revolver at the 930 Club before your album dropped, and it was one of the greatest shows I've ever seen in my life. But this is what I really wanted to talk about, was when we were waiting for you to set everything up, I just Googled your image, and I found this picture of you in the band Why Can't? Tori Reed, is that it? It's like you and Tori Amos were in a band together in the 80s, and dude,
yeah.
Your hair is fucking awesome.
Yeah, that was after an all-nighter, too. I did my own makeup, too.
If people haven't seen you, you have the greatest curls in rock and roll, bro.
Yeah. Well, I had pretty curly hair. I somehow, I think it had to do with drugs, basically. But with the more drugs I did, the curlier my hair got. Or I could.
Yeah, drugs will make you get a perm.
And I could hide drugs in my hair too, which was great because everyone would get. It's like I could go through
Dude, I think a vial of ketamine just fell out of Matt's hair.
There was a time in Hollywood when if you didn't have the right hair, you couldn't get in a band. So that particular era in Hollywood was early 80s, and I met Tori playing in a piano bar. And we put a band together, and I was basically the instigator. And then we got signed to Atlantic Records by Jason Flom, and I got no return phone call for like 2 months. And I realized that they didn't sign the band; they signed Tori.
Oh, they were like, dude, we cannot have that drummer with the feathered perm. There's no fucking way he's going to be able to resonate with ladies.
He's distracting the audience. It's like they're all looking at that guy, and it's So anyway, long story short, yeah.
Let's dive into the record. So tell me about when did you first hear Cheap Trick?
Well, I'm a child of the 70s. I was born in the 60s, but my upbringing was 70s, right? So my musical background, my learning launching pad for being a drummer came from that era. So, Cheap Trick came out a little bit later in the 70s. There was a bunch of bands I was into in the early 70s, Deep Purple, Sabbath, of course, even Queen out of England. Before Freddie cut his hair short, they were the Killer Queen era and all that stuff. And then, obviously Kiss was one of the first concerts I saw in 75.
Great band.
At the Long Beach Arena. So when I discovered Cheap Trick was probably actually the record we're about ready to talk about, because, I saw them and I understood the imagery of it and everything. And I remember hearing Surrender, and that was probably the first big single that I heard, which is off the second album.
Great song.
Yeah. And then obviously they made this live record that became their biggest selling record of all time. So you kind of couldn't get away from it. And, after the Alive album, which came out in about 75, and then Peter Frampton, obviously one of the biggest selling live albums of all time.
Yeah. I can't wait to dig into that. Yeah.
Which was like 76.
That's the only shit I know from that record.
Yeah, which was like 76 or 77, around that era. Basically live albums became a thing that bands did and released, and I think the first live album I heard that I loved was Made in Japan by Deep Purple, but that was early 70s. So
yeah, so this is 79. So you're hearing this from the first time. You've already had all these different records come out from your artists that you love doing live records. Cheap Trick, about, you fuck with them, but then this comes out, and what does this do to you?
Well, I think what it did for everybody in that era is we all loved live music, and everybody was, when I was a kid, you went to concerts, and then you saw the band live, and you got to remember bands like Queen were going to Japan, and imagery of Japan was a huge thing in rock and roll when you were a kid. It was like, oh my God, they're in Japan. But you would only see the picture in like Cream magazine or Circus magazine, and you were just like, you were enamored with the imagery of them hanging out in like Tokyo, walking with kids. And, I remember seeing the Queen photographs, and it was so alluring to me as a kid. So when you heard about Cheap Trick going to Japan, and here you got this handsome guy, Robin Zander, and the two handsome guys and the two nerdy guys.
Yeah,
right?
Dude, it's like I've never seen such a dichotomy of sexy and ugly.
Yeah, but that was the angle they played, and we actually stole that a little bit for Neurotic Outsiders. We had me and Duff were the two rock guys, and then we had Steve Jones and John Taylor were dressed in like Vivienne Westwood suits, and we always thought about Cheap Trick, even though I don't think we were nerdy. We were just trying to kind of come up with some kind of gimmick, and that. Their gimmick became, there's two handsome guys and there's two kind of weird guys. But you would see the imagery. And then when you heard the fans, the way they laid that into the record, it just brought so much excitement from the original studio versions. I mean, I Want You to Want Me was a bigger single from the live version than from the record.
And night and day too, because like I had only heard the live song on the radio growing up, and then when we already broke down their Cheap Tricks record in color a few months ago, and I was like, I was so excited to hear I Want You to Want Me, and then you hear the regular version, and you're like, this is the cheesiest shit I have ever heard. Like, where the fuck is the live, like that fucking power,
Well, they had that live loose thing, and you stick a band in the studio, and they just wrote the song, and they've played it, maybe whatever amount of time to get the take.
Yeah.
And it becomes sort of a little bit sterilized, I guess. So when you heard the
so
live
sterilized, yeah.
Yeah, and it was a little more up tempo. It had a punky feel to it, but pop at the same time. And that album came out. That song "I Want You to Want Me" was on the In Color record. But then you got to remember they recorded the live from Budokan before the Heaven Tonight album came out. So those.
Yeah.
If you listen to Live from Budokan, there isn't a lot of Heaven Tonight on there. I think the only one they did on Live from Budokan was maybe Surrender.
Yeah, I felt like, what's funny that you're saying that is because, like I said, my only experience with Cheap Trick was the hits. and the album In Color, because like I said, we did it on this podcast. And so to really, I didn't understand why people dug Cheap Trick the way that they do after listening to In Color until I heard At Budokan, because this album is real rock star shit, dude. Like you could just feel the energy of the crowd. You can feel the band vibing off of the crowd. And then you start researching it, not just knowing the songs, but dude, this album is in the Library of fucking Congress.
Well, yeah. And you got to remember that in those days, bands released albums every year. Like, labels were pressing to put records out. So when they released Heaven Tonight, I think that was like maybe the spring of 78. Now, Live from Budokan was recorded, I think, in April, and they released Heaven Tonight in May. So they released Live from Budokan based on the fact that Heaven Tonight wasn't doing that great. And then they heard an album, they heard a live recording, they're like, oh my God, we got something here. Plus, with all the energy that was going on with live records, like everyone knew Frampton Comes Alive. So all the labels were like, let's put the live album out. We got the recording. It didn't cost us anything. Well, yeah, they put that out 6 months after Heaven Tonight. Yeah. And then they re-released singles from the In Color record. And so with the only difference being Ain't That a Shame, the Elvis tune. And that was just a cover they did live, which became a big single for them too. So I knew the same songs you did. I Want You to Want Me, Surrender, but there's songs like Clock Strikes 10, amazing song, California Man, which is funny because they performed that at Live in Budokan, but it's not on the first release. It's only on the reissue.
What I love, and especially because you said it earlier, it was about Japan. What is it about Japan where their fans are just like batshit crazy nuts? Because what I was reading about Cheap Trick was that they were fucking like the Beatles when they showed up there. They couldn't walk down the street. Girls were ripping off their clothes, etc. Have you ever experienced something like that, like on a tour? Was there a place where you were just like you felt like you were in the Beatles in your career? Well, in a region?
Brazil, probably, because when I first joined Guns N' Roses and we played Rock in Rio in '91, and it's in my book, all the stories. My book was gonna come out this month, but we pushed it to August based on all this crap that's going on. But
plug it, dude. Take this moment. Plug the book.
It talks about when I get off the airplane. It's my first show. We're playing 140,000 seat stadium. And here I am.
A ridiculous number. 158,046.
And we sold out 2 nights. So,
oh my God.
So I get down to Brazil, and here I am. I've just joined the band. We're in the middle of making Use Your Illusions 1 and 2, which, we went out and performed a bunch of songs. But anyway, we landed at the airport. Izzy, me, Axel, Slash, and Duff. They take us down through the bottom of the airport because there's about 4,000 or 5,000 kids out front, right? Screaming like crazy. And so they got to get us out the back, and we're in these vans, and we're going through this crowd, and they're banging on the van, and they're climbing on top of the car. And I looked out the window, and I look over at Izzy Stradlin. He goes, "Hey," Izzy goes, "Welcome to the band." I go, "Man, this is like being in the Beatles." I'm like, And that's when I really felt that sort of fandom, because you don't really get that in America. I remember being a kid and going to like the Long Beach Arena and like going to see Deep Purple and then going back by the backstage gates and waiting for the limos to pull out. Yeah. And going, hey, but there'd only be about like 20 of us out there, and and thinking you're going to get an autograph or something, but as a kid, but that was how I felt there. And even in Japan, same thing. When we landed and we did the Tokyo Dome with Guns N' Roses, I remember landing and all these kids at the airport. And the Japanese fans were so amazing because they love to give you gifts. So they make little dolls of you and draw paintings and give you a bottle of sake. And
I'm just hoping that they made a doll of you, but with the Tori Amos band hair. You're like, dude, I don't rock that shit no more.
I had the same curly ass hair, but a headband. Remember, it was like crazy.
Oh yeah.
But remember, it was the early '90s. It was sort of
course.
You look in the mirror and go, I look good. Now you look back and you're like, oh my God.
No judgment, bro. Like, dude, I have wavy hair, bro. I use Diva Curl. I know what it's all about, bro.
Well, I don't think they had like flat irons back there or like straightening shit. I don't know. I mean, maybe I could have got something for like African American hair, but I wasn't hanging around with Gilby Clarke yet.
Yeah. He's the straightest hair I've ever seen in my life.
It's I wasn't hip to it, so. And I didn't really give a shit, to be honest. I mean, we were just drinking and having fun and, letting it fly, letting our freak flag fly. But so I felt like that. And I felt like that in South America. So I could represent. But as a kid watching Cheap Trick or Queen, if you remember the imagery, you're like, wow, Japan. And it was such a mystical place. But, now I've played with Robin Zander a lot. We talk about, and they're still big there. They could go back to Japan and play multiple nights because they have that thing that sort of, it just resonated with Japan. I mean, the weirdest thing was going to Japan with Guns N' Roses, and the band that was bigger than us, which was so bizarre, was Mr. Big.
Oh, hold on, little girl. Show me what she's done to you. Dude, that song fucking rips, bro.
They were huge in Japan. I mean, they could play massive arenas. And in America, they did okay. They did
all right. Yeah, maybe they played 930 Club, but they're not fucking, they're not doing arenas like VR or fucking GNR, dude. That's what's so funny is that you can be enormous in Tunisia, but no one knows who the fuck you are in Detroit.
Oh yeah, I mean there's a lot of stories about that. So you got to go where the love is, right? I always tell, people think, oh man, I remember having a conversation with Pink one time, and she was like, Matt, I can't even get any gigs going on in America, but they love me in Australia, and I'm doing 21 shows down in Australia. I go for it. I mean,
fucking do that yeah, dude. Go where the money is, go where the love is.
Who cares?
That's the most Eckhart Tolle shit I've ever heard in my life about being present. It's like nobody wants to hear you in fucking San Bernardino, then go to fucking Hanoi.
It's a big wide world out there. Yeah, it's a big world. Yeah.
So let's dive into the record, okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, so the album opens with Hello There. Peter, play the first verse. So in my opinion, this is the greatest opener in concert history, and I think it's mostly because of the story. So it was written as a perfect concert opener, but it was mostly used because they wanted to play it during sound check, and most of the time they wouldn't get a sound check, so they used this song. They'd open up their shows, so they didn't have to waste a song with the sound person while they were adjusting their levels.
Well, that's right. I mean, and they understood once they did it, how epic it is. I mean, I still use it when Robin comes and plays with me. We use it as the opener because it's the best opener probably ever written. I mean, in my opinion. And then they got Goodbye, right? Which they did on the Budokan
which is
record.
Great. It's
good.
But this is, you have to keep this in mind. My first real experience with the band Cheap Trick is listening to In Color. This is the first song I hear. I got it on my headphones and I'm like, oh, I couldn't imagine what this would be like live. This would just blow the fucking roof off the place. Let me ask you a question, because you said something about how because I know you've jammed with Robin Zander in Kings of Chaos. Were there any preconceived notions did you have going into it? Like, what was it like upon meeting them? Because you're playing with somebody you grew up listening to.
Well, I played with Robin. Robin had come and guested with Velvet Revolver a couple times. I remember Bunny actually came out and played, and we did a cover of Surrender with Velvet Revolver for a B-side. Like, we had to do a lot of B-sides, because it would give you'd have to do an extra single for Japan or something for a a release. So we did like weird covers, but that was like a song we all loved. And so I remember one night, I think we were in like someplace, well, we were near Chicago for sure. I think it was Alpine Valley or one of those sort of venues. And Robin and Rick and Bunny came backstage. And I remember them rolling in, and I think they were still partying in those days because we were all trying to be on the straight and narrow, and they came in and I remember Bunny got up on my drums, and here I got this big, enormous rock kit, and he's up there. And I came out front and played tambourine and sang. I stood in front of Slash's amp, which was like, oh my God, really? Like how loud. I couldn't even hear a word I was singing. I was like, Slash, there's nothing but guitar where I'm standing. It's like, so Rick Nielsen's over there and he's playing all these crazy chords. Like he's got such a loose vibe. And Robin came out dressed in the Dream Police outfit, the whole thing. And we did Surrender. And that was kind of the time when I started to get to know him better because they were around. And then I think Robin came and played with us again. Someplace else he got up with us. So we just started doing that kind of stuff. And then I got his phone number. And then I went on a tour in Africa with my band Kings of Chaos. And I invited Robin Zander. I had Billy Gibbons and Steven Tyler. Three of my favorite bands out of the 70s.
Yeah.
And so when I put the set list together, it was just like, oh my God, this is like, what? Like, Jesus Left Chicago into like, Waiting on the Bus, all the classic ZZ Top. And then, and then I'm like, Steven, we're not doing Love in an Elevator. We're doing Toys in the Attic, Back in the Saddle, all my favorite.
He's like, I don't care, just as long as I can go zibba zabba deeble doo zow. And you're like, all right, we got you, bro. You do that on like 5 tracks, bro.
Yeah, and then now I got Robin Zander singing Tush, right? Because that was Dusty's part, So Robin, I get Steven and Robin and Billy all doing. We did Come Together Beatles because. If you listen to Cheap Trick, there's a lot of Beatles influence in that, and
100%, yeah, 100. But it's very just down to the harmonies, just the structure of their songs, yeah. And
that was an easy one to throw together. It's like I say to young musicians, there's a certain catalog of songs you need to learn, and if you don't know them, get out of the business. So
you got to be ready to play. Yeah. I Want to Take You Higher by Sly and the Family Stone at the drop of a hat.
Yeah. Well, the classics, right? Come Together, Rock and Roll, all those songs that are sort of just put that in your repertoire. And
sure.
But so anyway, we did those kind of things. And then Robin just became a really go-to guy and one of the most humble guys I've ever met. He, not to say that Steven isn't humble, but he's the classic lead singer. He's got to have bottled water at a certain temperature and, things like that. 3 assistants. And Robin's a guy, you got to remember when Cheap Trick got together, he was the guitar player. They were looking for a different singer. They were looking for a guy to sing lead and they couldn't find a singer. He was going to be the rhythm guitar player. And the story goes is, they couldn't find a guy and Robin was like, I'll sing. And he kind of became the lead singer by default. But if you see some of the stuff from Budokan, he's on guitar and singing on a lot of songs. And then he started to go up front as a front man later and just sing with the microphone and, and do that kind of thing. But so Robin, my classic thing is lead singer disease. What is that? LSD. And what I say is if the guy never had to carry an amplifier or carry equipment into the venue and he's the lead singer and he just shows up and says, where's my microphone? That's where you
LSD.
That's where the problem starts.
It's like 3 tabs of LSD.
So you look at a guy like Robin Zander and you go, oh, that guy huffed gear. Right?
Yeah.
He had the band van and he owned, I believe the story goes, he owned the PA. So
then you're 100% in the band then.
Now he's a guy who's huffed gear. He's lifted gear. He's
a schlepper.
Yeah. And That's my little French bulldog. And so basically, that's why I think he's just such a genuine guy. But at the same time, I don't feel he gets the respect he deserves as one of the greatest rock singers.
He really doesn't. He really doesn't. But I think it's just like with why we're doing this podcast. There's a lot of people just, in my age group. I'm 40. They probably never really listened to Cheap Trick. They know the hits, and that's about it.
And
you know what I mean?
Like I said, he's one of the greatest, in my opinion, one of the greatest rock singers. If you listen to the range of his vocal, it's way up in the stratosphere.
It's fantastic, yeah.
But he's never had that sort of like David Lee Roth, Steven Tyler, put yourself out there. Yeah, hey man, here I am. Whoa,
yeah.
He doesn't like. It's not like he doesn't sell himself, but he just sings and plays rock and roll. And for me, Cheap Trick is a working class band. They're from the Midwest. They're a band that just tours, plays. To this day, they're still on the road, just going every night.
Let me ask you a question, because you mentioned something. You were talking about like LSD. You were talking about like, Xander and just being this guy's guy, being a part of the band, schlepping. But you also played with two of the biggest singers that I think have that myth of being the LSD. Like, how is that like? When you play somebody like Robin Zander and then having played with two guys who are as talented as anybody ever could be, but also just have these stigmas about them, how do you see that difference?
Well, it's interesting because those guys become bigger phenomenon somehow, because there is this sort of, wacky craziness around them, right? Which makes them a whole other level of the classic rock and roll lead singer. They've got this other stuff that you hear about, and then it being in Guns N' Roses, that was a dangerous rock and roll band. You never knew what you're going to get from Axl Rose, right? So he's going to come out and he's going to give you the show he's going to give you, and you don't know if that's going to be good or bad or otherwise. So it never was bad. Don't get me wrong. When I was in the band, if he was in a bad mood, that was a great show. It was like, all energy went into what we did on stage. And it there was nights we went up there and we weren't even talking to each other, but man, we would throw down, because for rock and roll, you would channel that energy into that performance, and you could be pissed off and I could smack the drums twice as hard or whatever I wanted to do. Right. So when Axl came with that kind of energy, it was like, uh-oh, watch out. This is going to be some hair raising shit. Right. And there's great attributes about that. And I look back in retrospect, and why would you want the guy any other way? It's like same thing with Weiland. Like Scott could come out one night, you'd be like, whoa, what's going on? You wanted to kind of go, dude, can we kind of like, pull that together? But it just didn't go that way. And unfortunately, that was a different sort of thing. Scott was being drawn by different sort of energy, obviously, darker energy. But man, he could be great some nights. He would come out and you'd just be, oh my God.
In my opinion, I mean, well, first of all, like, as I'm a comic, but I also like do all the music shit, hearing Guns N' Roses in 1987 played on DC 101, they played the whole record. That was one of the big life-changing moments. The other one was hearing STP Core. And that was when I was like, oh, I can be a lead singer and I can be as cool as that motherfucker. Because I don't think there have ever been two singers that are as talented and in their genres and as cool, in my opinion, as Scott Weiland and Axl Rose. When Scott was perfect, he was perfect.
Yeah, you got to look at the gift of where they came from, their songwriting ability. Scott could sing a melody in like 5 minutes and you go, oh, that's, oh my God. And lyrically, he had a cool sensibility with lyrics. Same thing with Axl. Axl, if you go back and really dig deep into Axl's lyrics, here you go, they're coming out of the hair era, right? But there's so much depth within the lyrics, and he's able to do a song called Coma, then turn around and sing a song called Sweet Child of Mine, right? So he would understand the simplicity of a lyric that's going to resonate to a big audience with a song like Patience or Sweet Child of Mine or whatever, but he's able to go deeper too. So that was there's a lot more to when you think about the guy than just the front man, because he had all this stuff inside that he was able to bring out lyrically. And that's what made that band still to this day have that catalog that wasn't long lived. It wasn't a lot of records.
No. If you really think about it, it's two records, really, really three, but because you use your illusion, but it's like there's so much epic shit on there. It's just filled. Like you could play one of the deep cuts from Guns N' Roses and no one would give a fuck. They'd be like, this song rips just as hard.
And, Weiland and his attribute was, he was always trying to dig deeper on the art fact. He was looking for Bowie and, him and Axl loved Elton. That's why we did November Rain. That's, he looked to the greats for, as we all did. And we're talking about this era of the 70s. We all grew up on the music we're talking about right now, Cheap Trick, all the greats. And, I remember going to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and thinking, man, this is not right. I should not be getting inducted before Cheap Trick and Deep Purple and, all these bands. This is weird, because as a musician coming up, these are your heroes. And now, like he asked me the question about Robin, I'm like, now he's my friend. I can call him. He wrote a thing on the back of my book. He gave me a quote, and that kind of thing. And that's for me, that's like bucket list stuff. I'm like, I've had this great career, but at the same time, I've been able to play with my heroes. And
oh, dude, I couldn't agree with you more. Like the people that I've met since I started doing this, Bill Burr is one of my best friends, and he has this quote because we were doing something. You know what it was? We were actually doing the goddamn comedy jam at the Roxy, and Dave Kushner is homies with Bill, and now he's a good friend of mine too. And we did an AC/DC song with Burr on drums, Kushner on guitar, my band playing the rest of the parts, and me singing. And I remember I just looked over at Bill and I was like, this is the coolest shit ever. And then afterwards he came up to me. He's like, yeah, dude, see what happens when you follow your dreams? Cool shit.
Yeah, that's right.
Cool shit happens. All right, listen, let's go into a couple more tracks and then we'll get to some facts. Because I know you got to get out of here. All right, so we're going to skip the second track, go on to Lookout. All right. So this was originally recorded for the debut album and is one of the two previously unreleased original songs from that record demanded that they put it on the album. Peter, play just a little smidge of it.
There is somewhere, someplace in the world
This is just a song Robin wrote about trying to get laid. And you've heard the stories about Cheap Trick, but I wanted to ask you, because you have the autobiography coming out, what is the craziest tour story you can tell me?
Oh man, we spent almost 2 years editing my book because the shenanigan story, the sex, drugs, and rock and roll stuff. I was like, oh man, I guess they're going to get the fact that, I was with a lot of girls and did a lot of drugs and
great hair.
Do I have to tell like 20 of those stories? No, let's just tell like 5. So,
yeah,
dude. That was the hardest thing about writing the book was which stories do I cut out, like I cut out all my sort of like Charlie Sheen era stuff,
Oh yeah.
Like, where does that fit in? Well, that's just straight up, debauchery. But I mean, there's just so many great ones. But a lot of the craziest stuff happened in South America. We were involved in probably one of the first stadium tours of South America. Going all the way through Venezuela and Colombia and Chile, and we played countries no band had ever played before. Really. I mean, with the exception, even Queen had only played in Brazil and I think Argentina. So here we are going on this mad 50,000 a night stadium tour. So we land in Venezuela, Caracas, and we've got interpreters everywhere we go. We've got these people that are able to, because in those days there wasn't a lot of English language at all down there. I'm talking early 90s. So of course, I hook up with the interpreter, who's this beautiful Venezuelan girl. And
Why wouldn't you? Of course. Bilingual.
I end up in the jungle of Venezuela with this girl and this taxi driver, and we find cocaine for $3 a gram. And
Fuck.
And I'm like,
yeah, dude.
I'm like, well, give me 10. Give me 10, amigo. Cocaína,
Yeah.
amigo, 10. So the band can't find me. I'm basically gone. And one day Blur turned into 3, and here we are doing this massive stadium gig, and they end up there's no GPS in those days. So, it's not like
you're
you could,
gone, dude. Yeah, you are gone.
it's not like you track me on my phone, It's like, so they find me on a balcony of this hotel, and I somehow got a hold of like raw Caribbean rum, and there I am. And basically they throw me in the shower, and here I'm fairly new to the band at this point too. So they're like, uh-oh. Right? They're like, and the one thing about Slash that I always loved about Slash is, he had the Keith Richards philosophy. It's like, if you're going to party all night and sleep in a chandelier, at least you could show up at the gig and do a good job. Don't.
Yeah.
So basically I make the show. We play the show in Venezuela. And we fly out to Colombia. So we've got this private plane. Well, as soon as we take off, the military bombs the airport. And yeah.
Dude, that is the most rock and roll shit ever. It's like it's like, when did this plane ride turn into a scene from Con Air?
Yeah, and military coup of the government, right? So, and
Fucking Red Dawn.
The president and his family and his daughter, who's super hot, were at our show. They were there, and I remember them leaving. And then as soon as we left, it's like, did they wait for us to leave before they bombed the airport? It's like, what?
We must protect Axl Rose. We must protect Izzy.
Yeah, it was a pretty big deal. We were there, I guess. So we land in Colombia. We get off the plane. I'm in an SUV with about 4 bodyguards. We've each got an SUV. It's crazy. And they all have guns. And I remember we pull up to the hotel, and there's armed military surrounding our hotel. And there's a tank in front of the front door, a tank. And I said to my manager, Doug Goldstein, I said, Doug, what's with the tank? And he says,
like, we thought you guys would want to ride it out on stage tomorrow night. I don't know why.
Well, no, he actually said the tank is there to protect you guys. I'm like, what? And he says, yeah, there's a lot of kidnapping here. There's a lot of people being kidnapped. I go,
you needed a tank.
Yeah, so we're here. We are in Bogota, Colombia, and we can't leave the hotel, so we have we order in, if you will, and that's in the book. All I'm going to say is we order in, but buy the book, and the story's great. And then we party, and then we go and do we have a problem with the stage. The stage collapses in the stadium. We're supposed to do 2 nights, 50,000 seats. The stage collapses. So, and the gear is stuck in Caracas, Venezuela. So we have to cancel one of the stadium shows. Well, unbeknownst to us, the promoter tells the fans, your tickets are good for the one show. So now we've got 50,000 kids inside the stadium and 50,000 kids outside the stadium trying to get in. And complete mayhem. Well, we're going through again in I think we're in vans, and we're going through, and we see this happening outside, basically a riot. And we go on stage, and the tour was in November, because that time of the year is basically their spring, So we're on stage about 45 minutes in, and we're playing November Rain. And there's now the stage is collapsed, so they rebuilt the stage, so there's no roof over us. There's no lighting truss. There's just like makeshift. It's super third world, like not in a good way. And we're like, I'm pretty scared to go out there, to be honest. Now my manager sort of just pushes me and says, it's going to be all right. Get out there. Knock them dead. It's like, oh my God. Yeah. Okay. So we get up and we're playing November Rain, torrential downpour, right? Like
It had to happen. It's the
Like-
song you're playing. You're apocalypto conjuring it, speaking in tongues.
yeah. And so we leave, we got to leave the stage. It's not even, can't even keep playing. It's so bad. Well, the place riots and they go crazy and we can't go back out. So we end up going back to the hotel and our manager says, okay, everyone pack up. We're getting out of here. And we're like, what? So he goes, yeah, we got problems. The promoters are coming. I go, the promoters? And in those days, there was no Live Nation. It was none of that shit. It's like, who did you do the promotion with? It was all cartel, like hardcore. And here we are escaping the drug cartels of Bogota.
He's like, we wanted to hear the song Estranged. You did not fulfill your contract, so we kill you.
Yeah, so in my book, the story continues. It gets worse and worse and worse. We fly out of Bogota, Colombia. Now we're in the Andes. And do you remember the
movie Alive?
The book? Yes.
Yeah,
so we're
dude.
flying
Well,
over.
you crashed, and then you had to eat Izzy.
Well, we're flying over the Andes, and I'm saying, if we do die here, who's going to eat who, right?
You're like,
and
I'm eating Izzy.
so anyway, it gets even juicier as we continue through the country, the continent. I remember getting back to LA, and I was totally frazzled. Like, it was really one of the scariest tours that I've ever been on in my life. And everything was just sort of like in disarray. And I remember running into Anthony Kiedis. And he goes, yeah, man, I can't believe it, man. Like, our tour got called off because of you guys, right? And I'm like, fuck you, Anthony. I'm like, go ahead. Go down there. Be my guest. I said, here we are paving the territory. And Anthony, he's an interesting character. And you don't know what you're going to get from him. But I go, dude, be my guest. Get on your airplane. Go down there. Have fun. I'm just telling you, it's no man's land. It's like the wild, wild west down there. So in those days, that shit was just not really organized. And I remember taking those countries and playing them. And now you can go down and do a gig. It's all Live Nation and all squeaky
It's
clean.
safe, yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of that stuff in the book. So
get the book, everybody, when it comes out. All right, we only got a couple more minutes for this, so I just want to play my favorite part of this entire record. It's on the song "Need Your Love." So what I loved about this song, and it's a lot of shit that you had said too, is that it starts slow with like a Beatles like medley, if you want to call it that, and then halfway it just raves up like some sort of like AC/DC shit with all these incredible solos. But I wanted to play, this is the most Dougal shit I have ever heard in my life. Peter, play 737 on the record. That, in my opinion, is the reason this record is on this list, the 500 greatest albums list. That is the best fucking part, in my opinion, of the entire record. And if it wasn't illegal for us to play the full 2-minute build, like I would play the whole fucking thing, dude.
Yeah.
All right, let me ask you a question. So you listen to this record. What's your favorite song on this record?
Man, I got to say, I think Clock Strikes 10 is probably a very like, it's not a deep cut because it's one of my favorite Cheap Trick songs. But
this is their encore on the record.
Yeah.
This is what they end the show with, because they already did Goodbye. They already did Surrender, which, by the way, if anybody fucking knows, the opening of Surrender, the Beastie Boys took and used as their intro for Jimmy Jam, which is the first song off of Check Your Head. And that was what was really cool when I listened to this. I was like, holy shit. All right, but back to...
I love Clock Strikes 10. But for instance, like when Robin comes to play with me, obviously I'm putting a set list together and I kind of look at it like, okay, we're here to entertain. This is what my band does. We're here to entertain. Let's give them the hits. So, we play a Want You to Want Me. We do Surrender. We got to do those. And then we do Ain't That a Shame, because that just works really well. I love the ending of that live, the way they do the ending.
Yeah.
So we do that whole round at the end where everyone takes a solo, you know, with that. We do that for a while, which is so fun. And I'm like, should we do California Man? I'm like, people, I don't know how many people it's a little deeper cut for people that aren't us. Right? Like to just please the audience, basically. So we end up, we do Dream Police, because that's another just straight up epic Cheap Trick hit, right?
What's better? Dream Police or Dream Warrior by Dawkins out of the Nightmare on Elm Street 3 soundtrack?
Well, Dream Police, Dream Police.
Ain't gonna dream, no. I was hoping
that middle section with the strings and that odd time signature on that particular song, playing that properly. I tell every guys that when the guys come in, if it's Duff on bass or Robert DeLeo or who's ever I'm playing with, I'm like, okay, guys, check out that middle section. That's not 4/4. It goes wacky. And I go, and coming back into the outro, I mean, those guys are just so musical without even knowing it. It's just a great band, and in my opinion, needs a lot more accolades. And when they finally got in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I was so happy for them, because the underdog kind of unspoken sort of. There's never been any ego in front of Cheap Trick.
Yeah.
That's what I love about them.
Dude, great, and such a great way to end the show. Like they've just rocked. I don't even know, 16,000 Japanese screaming teenagers and 20-somethings, and then they come out, they play their hits, they fucking kill it with this song, which is great, because this song is about partying, and it's about like pretty wild weekends. And I wanted to ask you, because you seem to have slowed down a bit just in your partying and your crazy nights. Why did you slow down?
My liver.
I call him Ted.
Lawyers are expensive. Jail is not fun. I've done all that. It's all in the book, but it's on Amazon. It's called Double Talk and Jive, which was
Fuck yeah, it is.
Double Talk and Jive is the name of the book, and pre-order it on Amazon. And basically, my body just started telling me, you can't do this anymore. And funniest thing is, I do have a beer coming out, though, and I'll let you know. It's going to be at Bristol Farms.
Fuck yeah, dude.
And guess what it's called?
Permed 80s haircut.
The Drummer beer.
Fuck yeah.
The Drummer. And it's coming out of Brazil. It's Belgium-made style.
Dude, you love Brazil. That's one thing anybody's going to take away from this podcast, is that you fuck with South America.
Well, I'm down there.
90%.
I'm down there. I'm down there about 5 or 6 times a year. It's like I say, go where they want you, go where the love is. And I do a lot of business in Brazil. I make records down there. I just made my beer there. I'm doing a bunch of cool projects out of Brazil, because, the people are amazing, very passionate. And still, if any, you go down there and play a rock show, and they go nuts. They just love it. They just love rock and roll. And
yeah, I feel like every other place around the world besides America gets rock and roll and knows how to go to a rock and roll concert and fucking like thrash.
Yeah.
Whereas like in America, we're so boring at shows.
Well, like Germany, you think about Germany. They're like the territory that loves heavy metal, right? And I remember going and playing with the Hollywood Vampires. And, I played with Motorhead for a short stint. I don't know if you know that. But I was in.
No, I didn't.
I was
That's
in
dope.
Motor. I actually played. My first show was at the 930 Club. In 2009, I replaced Mickey on drums for about a month. So I went out with Motorhead, and we opened in the 930 Club, and then we went to Roseland in New York and did all those size venues. So here we are doing Ace of Spades and Overkill and all the great songs. And so the Hollywood Vampires decides they're going to do a version of Ace of Spades, you know? And I'm like, okay, guys, make sure you learn it right because the Motorhead fans will kill you. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I remember thinking that when I joined Motorhead. If I go up here, you know, I started growing a beard. I didn't take a shower for about a week.
Started hanging out of the Rainbow Room.
Yeah,
by
I mean, I love
Keno.
Lemmy was
Yeah.
Lemmy was my buddy. He called me up and asked me to play drums. I'm like, oh man, what an honor.
dope.
I go, you don't even
Yeah.
have to pay me. Do I have to pay you or what's the deal? So ended up going to Germany with the Hollywood Vampires. And before we go on stage, I'm like, I think we should cut Ace of Spades from the set tonight. And they were like, well, why? I mean, Johnny Depp's like, well, why? You know, I'm like, well, because if we fuck up, they're going to kill us.
Yeah.
You know, I remember being in Mannheim, Germany with Guns N' Roses and Nine Inch Nails opened for us. And the crowd hated them, 75,000 seats. And they just booed the whole time. I remember thinking, there's certain countries, if they don't like you, they'll let you know. It's like, you know, I remember opening for Metallica with the Cult when I was in the Cult. And we went out one night. There was 10 rows. The first 10 rows had their backs turned to us, flipping us off. It's like, that was during Justice for All. You know, they could give a fuck about the Cult. They were like,
they didn't want to see you. They didn't want to see you.
They-
All they wanted.
where is fucking James Hetfield? You know, Seek and Destroy in 1989. 99% guys in the audience. Definitely a portion of them were probably into Satan. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
Yeah.
it
Oh
was-
my God. Yeah. I'm still into Satan, bro. Come on. You're not into Satan, bro.
Yeah.
Beelzebub's not your homie. Hey, I wanted to ask you a question because usually we'll do facts and just because I'm having so much fun talking to you, I just wanted to always ask you this because you've had such an incredible career and you've played with, I mean, you played with like two people that, like I said before, changed my life, and you've had such a storybook career playing with the greats. What's the one show? What was the one show that you've done in your career that you feel like was that perfect moment? It was almost like the universe was just being like, I love you, Matt Sorum. You have this moment.
Oh man, I mean, so many highlights. Probably one of my greatest experiences was the Freddie Mercury tribute, which was done at Wembley Stadium, and we were invited to open the show. And it was us and Metallica, and then Queen came out. And you could watch it on YouTube. It's probably one of the most incredible shows. I mean, backstage was David Bowie, you know, Annie Lennox, Robert Plant, Elton. Elton and Axl did Bohemian Rhapsody, and just, you got to watch it.
Oh, I will.
They just crushed it. And I got to say, that night was just sort of like, I remember meeting Elizabeth Taylor. It's in my book. I drank with Liza Minnelli and George Michael. It's like just one of those nights that you just will never, ever be able to. It was sort of like being in a dream world.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Walking out going, wow, you know, Wembley Stadium sold out. But, you know, I would like to, you know, when I look back at especially Guns N' Roses, it's just sort of a surreal feeling. It's like almost like watching a movie on somebody else's movie,
Yeah.
like, and you're in it. It's just so weird. And, you know, the fact that we're sitting here and, you know, I'm out in Palm Springs and got two French bulldogs and hanging out. And,
One of them's got diarrhea, right?
yeah, she does. She's a little sick.
Dude, if you were
And-
with me, if we
and,
would have been recording this at the studio, I would have given you some flangly. I think it's called flangy because my dog shit all over the floor like a few weeks ago, so they stocked me up on medicine for. All right.
It's so weird
It's this.
going to the vet right now.
Oh,
you know,
it's
but I
weird
gotta-
doing everything. That's why, like, usually usually we would have done facts, we would have done all this shit. But it was like so much fun to talk to you. And I know you got to go. So to close this out, I just want to ask you, and I want to thank you, man. Like from the bottom of my heart, Matt, like, dude, you're a fucking homie. I love everything you do. I'm such a huge fan. And the fact that I got to sit down and talk to you for a few minutes during this crazy time that we're all dealing with, being able to chill with you right now made me forget that the world was falling apart. Like it was that perfect in my opinion. So before we go, give us your final thoughts on Cheap Trick live at Budokan.
Well, Cheap Trick live at Budokan, one of my favorite records of all time. Like you said, top 500 rock and roll albums ever. It just captured the sheer energy of a true rock and roll band, 4 guys playing music together. And that's what resonated with people going, well, here's 4 guys on stage live. And the moment was captured. And one of the greatest live bands of that era. And there it is. If you have it on vinyl or if you're streaming it or whatever you're doing, sit down and play it on vinyl one night. I have it on vinyl. Get yourself a cocktail or roll yourself a joint,
or do both, or do a bump of ketamine. If that's what you're into, bro, do ketamine.
Hey, man. If it was a double album, I would roll my joint in the double album. That's what I used to do when I was a kid. I would just take the double album, get the seeds out, right?
Yeah.
Roll that and use, so roll joint. Listen to it on vinyl from the beginning to the end.
If you can get out during this apocalypse and get it on vinyl, watch somebody, it's like, I'm going to risk my whole family's health and safety to go out and get Cheap Trick at Budokan.
Well, you could get it online. You could get that stuff delivered from Amazon or one of them. But, if you got that capability. But thanks for having me, man. I'm going to jump on a Zoom chat for Adopt the Arts right now, my charity. We're schooling the kids on Zoom.
Yes.
So.
Yes. And we'll promote all that. Matt, I mean this from the bottom of my heart, dude. Thank you so much, buddy. I hope you're happy and healthy out there. And thank you, bud.
You got it, brother.
Did I fanboy out? Who was worse, me with Matt Sorum or Bert Kreischer with Adam Sandler on Laugh Aid? If you haven't seen that, watch it. Find Matt on all social media at Matt Sorum. If you want anything Matt related, go to the website mattsorum.com. And don't forget to pick up Matt's book coming in May of 2020 called Double Talk and Jive, True Rock and Roll Stories from the Drummer of Guns N' Roses, The Cult, and Velvet Revolver. Get it, everybody. Get it on Amazon. Listen to it on Spotify. I don't even know if you can do that. Please subscribe to the 500 on Spotify. Now, we just listened to Cheap Trick from 1978. This week, Matt Pinfield chose Brendan Benson. Check out his new single, Richest Man, released on Jack White's Third Man Records and available on Spotify. It's evident this dude loves Cheap Trick. Check out the link on our website, the500podcast.com. And if you were in a band and were directly influenced by one of these albums or artists and you want your music featured on the 500 website, send your song to 500podcast@gmail.com. Make sure you put the album and the artist that influenced you in the subject line. Next week is Graham Parsons' week with his 1974 album, Grievous Angel. You've got some homework to do. Listen to the album on Spotify. Stay fleecy. Dougal.